Picture this. A man has spent the last 30 years meditating day and night. He wakes up, he goes to his mat, he eats a light meal at lunch, he returns to his mat, and then he goes to bed, starting the whole thing over again. Well, one day this man is approached at the top of his mountain in his secluded little hut home. He's approached by a group of individuals that say, "Teacher, please come and teach us everything that you have learned while meditating for these past 30 years. And so he comes down from his mountain, boards a plane, gets in a taxi, travels to the conference. He puts a small bag down and walks out on stage. While walking, he looks out at the room packed with attendees and realizes as he approaches the podium, he's feeling nervous. So what does he do? He steps off the podium, walks back across the stage, gets back in the taxi, boards a plane and flies back home and returns to the top of his mountain. The conference organizer, of course, is shocked and reaches out to him and says, "Teacher, why did you not speak? We were waiting." And he said, "Well, despite my 30 years of meditating, I realized that I was nervous. So I still have much to learn." Now, I'm pretty sure in this parable, what we're supposed to take away is that the learning to take over and master the ego is meant to mean that we never feel nervous anymore. We never feel anxiety anymore. Well, I call bullshit because that's not really how the mind works. Yeah, if I spent all day meditating for 30 years, I probably wouldn't feel nervous about much, especially if I lived on a mountaintop and didn't have 2 kids to raise. But here's the thing, I live at the bottom of the mountaintop. I live in the world. And when our minds, when our bodies encounter something that we've never encountered before, we get a little bit nervous. We get a little bit anxious. 40 million Americans live with anxiety. And especially in this moment that we're all experiencing collectively right now, I know that I've been experiencing some anxiety, some nervousness, some stress that I've never encountered before. So here's what I think. You know what would have made me think that that master had really learned something after 30 years of meditating? It would have been if he had walked out on that stage, noticed that he was feeling nervous, and done it anyway. Because that is the definition of courage. To feel nervous, to feel scared, and to do it anyway. On today's episode of Getting Real with Lindsay T.H. Jackson, hosted by the GSBA, we're talking about embracing anxiety. And we're going to be hearing from some of our community in order to understand how they are navigating this particular time, this particular space. What's coming up in their homes? What's coming up in their companies? Let's take a moment to meet each of them. First, we have Chantel Jackson, owner of Time Well Spent. Good morning, Chantel. Come off of mute for me. There we go.
Oh, good morning. Oh, hello.
Hi. We also have Dr. Yul Boyce, owner of Natural Health. Good morning, Dr. Yul.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
We have Amanda Pouter, owner of Perfect Copy and Print. Good morning, Amanda.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we have Sadie Schnitzler, owner of DWAS Photography.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you all for being here. I feel connected to you virtually at least. So I would really love to hear just a little bit from each of you about what it was like the first couple of weeks that you started to realize that we were going to be in this for longer than a month, and maybe as we entered into 2 months, what did you start to notice about your reaction? Where was anxiety showing up? Where were you feeling nervous? Amanda, maybe you could start us off. What was that first couple of weeks like for you?
Mhm. It was so as I started to kind of look at when it first hit, I felt like we're going to take this seriously, but we're not going to overreact. We're going to kind of keep an eye on what's going on and see what the reaction is. But as it became clearer and clearer that it was going to impact or especially in the Pacific Northwest where we are, I started to think about what the long-term implications of that are pretty soon. I tend to, have a pretty active imagination and look forward into the future and think about all the different. I'm also a huge sci-fi fan, so naturally my brain goes places maybe that it shouldn't, or are a little bit more fantastical.
It's not a coincidence that Dune is coming out as a movie, right? At the end of 2020? Yeah.
Right, right. So yeah, but I think from my perspective, I actually even told my team this back in March, I think, is I feel like we're inches into a marathon, and this is going to be a long one, and we're going to need to buckle in. And so part of what the challenge was, both sort of realizing that and learning to sit with that. It took me a little bit to get comfortable with that because it felt horrible. Was also though worried, okay, so if this is going to be a long time, how can I make any decision right
Mm.
now, and how do I have any idea of what I'm doing, and how do I have anything to guide me? And obviously there didn't feel, and in many ways doesn't continue to feel like there's any guidance or help or leadership, in a strong sense. There's bits and pockets, but not, there's not a plan.
And so how has that impacted both your home life and your company?
So I've actually bought the business last year. So it's not been terribly long that I've had the company. I have a small number of employees. I've had to deal with the reality of the business having to shut down completely
Mm.
for a month, having
Right.
many of our customers who are small businesses, restaurants, nonprofits impacted. So we saw the revenue impact well before that as they were being impacted. So then figuring out logistically, how do I take care of my people, both from a financial and hiring, and how do we keep the company together, but also from a psychological, and how do we keep focus. I care about these people. How do we take care of each other? And then at home, how do we manage? I have a partner. I've been married almost 20 years. And so
Wow.
how do we kind of manage that and balance and figure out what we're going to do and what our strategy is? And then, all the other worries about existential, health, family, folks that have family in other countries overseas. And then, yeah, obviously older members of my family, which was initially one of the biggest concerns, but I think that's broadened. So definitely been just a ball of everything. Like I'm sorry to answer all of the above sort of thing, but yeah.
Yes. Yes. How about for you, Sadie? How is managing two young children and the photography business? What were those first couple of weeks like for you?
Darn tricky. And I think I would be present for 183 emotions a day,
Mm.
sometimes all at the same time. Um, Being in the event industry as photographers, we were impacted real early. The last event that I did was February 27th, and we had talked about canceling it because we had been following the international news, and that was the last event that we did. And we had encouraged like the elbow bumps and ankle bumps and stuff, as opposed to handshakes and hugging at that stage. So I think that we were early adapters, as an individual and as a collective at that stage. And from there, watching the news when things took a serious pause for our business, I grieved real hard for the first several weeks, with a lot of people in my circles of lives not understanding the why. Many people didn't understand like how I was being so over dramatic about things. But I felt it early on, and I think that I managed a lot of anticipatory grief very early on. And the first weeks were really, really hard for me to get through. And I've balanced out a little bit more, or have maybe adopted some coping strategies that are working for now. But it was hard for sure.
Talk to me about, you said something key here. Talk to me about the experience of your emotional process and feeling as though others are projecting upon you that you're being over dramatic, that your feelings are unjustified.
That's a good question. I think I'm still personally unpacking that. I'm an empath. I'm a sensitive person, right? I care deeply about the world I live in and the ones around me that I love, my community. So looking at the most vulnerable populations, caring probably the hardest for them immediately, and then thinking about how they relate and engage to my life was, it's all I could see. So how I measured with that, I just kind of try to accept that we're all on a journey, and some of us operate with the best information that we have and that we know, which means some of us might not catch up, right? And I just have to accept and not live at effect of other people's. I need to trust my gut, be protective of my family, and do the parts that I can, right? And that's lifetimes of practice of letting other people be and working hard to not live at effect.
Yes.
Perfect.
Oh, and I can so relate to that in terms of that experience of being an empath. I remember the first time I went to the grocery store as we were really just starting to understand what was going on. And I was in the grocery store sort of like, I can feel all of this energy, all of this anxiety. I'm just gonna run in and get, I'm gonna pretend like I was buying something healthy. I probably wasn't. I was probably like, I need toilet paper and a bag of chips, because that was my first response. Don't worry, Dr. Yule, I didn't stay there. I eventually got some hummus to dip the chips in because that makes it health food.
Protein.
That's right. I was like vegetables all around.
Right.
Tell us, Chantel, how quickly was Time Well Spent shut down? Was it similar to Sadie because you were also in the event space?
Yeah, so I had like a lot of things like get canceled. I mean, I must have been the refund queen of like this whole thing because everyone was asking like for deposits back, and but like I'm a very optimistic person, and it's like I've been through like this before, and I don't mean like having to wear the mask and stuff, but I've been to parts where you don't know where your money's gonna come from, and so you're gonna have to get creative and you're gonna have to hustle. So it's like it hasn't really affected me like that. And I'm blessed to have that kind of mindset because, not everybody can be like me, and I try to get people to be like me sometimes. But when everything started getting canceled, I was like, well, all right, guys, here we go again. You know what I'm saying? So that's just kind of how I've been, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. And so have you been able to use that optimism to pivot your company a bit during this time?
Yeah, so to me, honestly, this has been like a really much needed break because I was going 0 to 100 like for the past 6 years of really trying to make it, you know what I'm saying? And this has really allowed me to, okay, you need to sit down, you need to have a bigger, stronger foundation for your business, you know what I'm saying? And that's kind of the way I've looked at it. I've been able to like really focus on, okay, branding or turning it into an LLC or like really getting some structure. Because a lot of times when you move too fast, there ain't no structure. So maybe there's people about me that needed this to really sit down and focus and put some structure to their business.
Absolutely. That's a great reframe. Thank you. Dr. Yule, can you talk to us a little bit about what is anxiety? Why is it so prevalent for so many Americans?
Wait, did I lose you?
No, we can have you. We can see you.
You can see me?
Yes.
Um, well, first I want to say that I echo many of the experiences that my co-participants have uh, have shared. I am no way an authority on this. When it first when the outbreak first happened, it was really hard for me as well. I suffered and I struggled, and yeah, some days I wouldn't get out of bed because I didn't understand how this was happening at this point in time, and and it's I think many people look to healthcare providers as a as a particularly in this period as sources of strength, and even just got essential workers or heroes. But we all are essential. We all have a role to play within this whatever this ecosystem. It's not just about doctors, nurses. It's about respiratory therapists. It's about people who collect our trash. And so I didn't understand how it was affecting this ecosystem. I mean, you don't know this, but I'm also a farmer with my family. I own a farm in Puerto Rico, where I raise cattle, where I grow breadfruit and other tropical fruits. I was concerned about the food supply back then. My family's from the Caribbean, Jamaica and Barbados. I was concerned about how this was going to affect tourism.
My family's from Barbados.
Really? Okay.
Tangent,
I
go
love
on.
it, love it, love it, love it. So these economies are very much dependent upon tourism. Once the planes stop coming, what are the implications for those communities, those countries in particular? So I just want to just honor these experiences because they were were my experience. They were my experiences as well. I think when it comes to anxiety, I think it's a broad term, for abnormal discomfort or abnormal angst, generated by some stimulus. And I think it differentiates. We can differentiate it based on the stimulus. For some, it's it's social anxiety. For others, it's anxiety induced by too much caffeine, or maybe a potent edible. The main reasons for anxiety. I think when it comes to COVID, I think we're talking about a very common form, GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, and it's. Are you asking me to explain how I treat it, or just to give just some context about it, or?
Oh, that's already great. I think, I love what you're saying there, that in bringing up general anxiety disorder, that we already, and I think it's perfect that we're talking about this in the midst of Mental Health Awareness Month, that we can have members of, let me rephrase that, we can already be living with or have members of our family or members of our community who have already been living and doing work to manage their anxiety. But then all of a sudden we had this sort of social anxiety that cropped up. And for some individuals, that was really a tipping point to say, I was already doing work to managing what I was experiencing. And now all of my stability was thrown out of whack. And then add to that, that some of us who maybe have had very little experience with a consistent feeling or experience with anxiety to now step into this. Have any of you found that you are surprised by these feelings? And in particular, has anybody felt any sadness or anger with yourself for some days not being able to manage how you're feeling? Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I felt like I've had days where I feel like a toddler and I just am like, I don't want this. I don't like this. I disagree with it and I don't want the world to be like this. And my kind of tension, like I'm a big crier, so it comes out my eyes, like, particularly, poignant, like, commercial or like, sitcom. And I'm like, oh, that's so, like I'm crying. So it comes out my face, which is super helpful in professional environments when it comes out of a sudden. I also had the experience, I think 2 weeks ago, I did my weekly errand run and was wearing a mask out and was going to go into a shop, but no one in the shop was wearing a mask, and had this physical reaction and felt it in my face and couldn't go in and didn't like that. Also, don't like not feeling in control of, tears coming to my face and feeling that sort of thing. So I've kind of had both, and it is frustrating with myself. It's something I've been working on, but it's still frustrating with myself not to feel like you're in control of how you react and how you portray yourself externally.
Mm, thank you for that. As business owners, how many of us like the myth of control?
In our household, we've been doing a lot of diagrams of what our locus of control is and what we can control, what we cannot control, and looking at where we can implement practices to, I guess, create an illusion of control. So whether that's like doing breathing exercises or going for a walk or making sure we laugh or whatever it is, right? What we eat for lunch, those kind of things, because
I love that. I love that because I think we have a real opportunity to look at our little people and think about what are they experiencing in this moment, and how do we give them language to voice what's coming up for them, and how to process and move through this. Dr. Yule, you had some great tips that we could be using during this time. Could you share a couple of those with all of us?
Sure. Something that I try to implement, I mean, personally, because I think it's important to kind of, really practice what you preach, is literally peer support. I mean, there have been times I've had to grab a friend, well, not grab them literally, but, say, hey, I need to talk. Let's go for a walk. So peer support, kind of leveraging your network of support, touching base with other entrepreneurs, people within, our particular chamber of commerce. If need be, if you're able to, kind of connecting with your therapist. Exercise has been a godsend. Walking, cardio, gyms are closed, so finding a YouTube video that works for you and participate, doing some exercise, in home, diaphragmatic breathing, something that I really enjoyed. I do personally actually recommend to patients. Making tea. I like the idea of making tea because I encourage patients to be participatory in their own wellness as much as possible. And so the idea of steeping the tea, sipping it and being present, I think it's been very helpful for many people. I mean, personally, as well as for patients. And I love this. It's a great time to, experiment with different herbs that we may not be familiar with, lavender, passion flower, something simple as chamomile tea. So those are some basic things that I've recommended to patients, and I'm putting into practice more now than ever. But I think what has been most helpful, I think, is just leveraging our network of support. And I think the caveat is, and Sadie, you spoke this earlier about sometimes people in our circle not necessarily understanding our unique experience and receiving complaints of being, what's the word used? I mean, overly dramatic.
Yeah.
That's been challenging for me at times, and at times I've gotten into disputes with colleagues because I felt as though they were making light. Amanda, you said it's a marathon. And I think many people assumed, okay, this is going to be over, by more than a weekend. But Dr. Fauci said this is going to be here till the fall, and so no, I'm not being over dramatic. This is real, this is real. And so my anxiety, my angst, my concerns, are valid, as are, the Chantel, as your experience and your response. Okay, I'm going to get through it. I'm going to take this time to regroup and create more structure for my business. I think they're all valid. I think we have to allow space for all experiences, and not just, sorry, go ahead.
No, I cut you off. Go ahead.
And not just, tell each other, just deal with it. Just some people need to kind of, be present and sit in that, fight or flight space for a little bit. They can't stay there, or it's not advisable to stay there. But I think we have to honor all experiences, all reactions to this crisis.
Yes.
And support each other accordingly.
4 amazing nuggets in there that I hope everybody really returns to watch this again, because, one, in terms of looking at ways to create that community, even if it's virtually. I have to say, I've been having more family gatherings than I have over, the course of my adulthood. Everything from birthday parties for 75-year-old great aunts to, dance parties. And yes, we can all agree, trying to get your 75-year-old aunt onto Zoom.
Hilarious.
Hilarious, but it is worth the effort. I promise you, especially when you're on the phone on one end going, no, the green button, just, okay, hold your phone up to the computer so I can figure it out. It's worth it. So really thinking about ways that you can communicate and create that sense of community. Also, I think really important, that idea that how we respond to crises is different for different personality types. Remember, we talked about that in my interview with Joey a few weeks ago. There are going to be different responses that each of us have. Some of us, it's going to be to go into ourselves so that we can recuperate and self-nurture, and then we'll come back out ready to motivate. For some of us, it's going to be about social action. How do I get involved in my community? How do I make sure that I am helping during this time? A very Mr. Rogers response. And for some of us, it's going to be about family. I'm going to focus on my partner. I'm going to focus on my family and use that as a way to create safety for myself by seeing them feeling safe. And all of those responses are important and valid. But I love the reminder that when you are having that fight or flight moment, go into whatever strategy works for you, but then come back out, engage, participate. Chantel, what has been for you, do you have a mantra or a thought, or how is it that you keep yourself coming back to optimism?
So like when I think about anxiety, like I was fortunate to recognize what it was as a kid, so when I get that feeling, it's kind of like something that's like rising up, and then it's just like, okay, well, just jump. Like that's the kind of mindset I always had, was like, I love being in control, but I don't like my emotions being in control of me, especially when I'm trying to accomplish something. So if I'm standing on a cliff and I know that the destiny is me taking flight, even though I don't know how to crawl, I don't know how to run, but I'm going to just believe like Peter Pan that I can fly anyway, that's the kind of mindset that I try to have. So I just think of a happy thought and I just take flight. Like, it sounds childish, but I'm 32 years old, and that's the same mentality I've been having for a long time since I've been watching Peter Pan. So, but yeah, it's like we only have like one life, and I would hate to know that I wasted time, and that's where I get my, my time well spent from, because it's like I want to make sure that I live life all the way to the fullest, and that's just where it comes from.
Chantel, I need to make you one of my lifeline calls. You're amazing.
There's a great little children's story about a little boy who is outside, and the mother is seeing him through the window, and she sees him come up into the view of the window and then disappear, and then come up into the view of the window and disappear. And she watches this as he goes and continues this practice for a good 5 minutes. And then finally she goes, what is he doing? And she walks out and he's running and jumping and landing, and then, going, oh, I gotta try it again. And he does this, and finally she says, sweetie, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I figure today might just be the day that I fly. I don't want to say I didn't try. I always think about that, and that's one that I instill in my children. In those moments, when you are really feeling the anxiety rise up, I'd like to hear from each of you. Where do you feel it in your body? For me, I'm even feeling it right now because I'm so excited to be having this conversation. So I have learned to recognize the two sides of anxiety. There's like excited anxiety, I want this to be so perfect anxiety. And then there's an anxiety that is really a retreat for me. But in this moment, and generally when I feel anxiety, I get very cold. And so I'm even feeling it now because I'm so happy to be having this conversation with all of you. Where do you feel it in your body? Sadie?
I feel it in my chest and heart area, I think, mostly. And there are some times when it's like an anxiety around dread, right? Or fear, like more of a stomach, right? If it's the nerves, anxiousness, anticipatory sort of thing, it's definitely more heart-centered for me. And then when it's like that existential dread or fear, I think it's more in the gut, stomach.
Yes. Dr. Yule, how about for you?
I feel it in my chest, my heart. I develop palpitations and I start to sweat profusely.
Yeah. Anybody else relate to that? Either on the panel or out there. Drop us a comment if you're joining us live on Facebook, or if you're live on the webinar, if you can relate to that. How about for you, Amanda?
Yeah, I think for me it's chest, not so much heart, but it's higher in the chest, and then it comes out my face. My face feels hot, like that's related to the tears. Again, tears definitely come out as a reaction. Absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, Chantel?
Here, like in my mouth, because it's like, what am I gonna say? Is TD Jakes gonna come out, or is Cardi B gonna come out? Like that's you be right here, boy, because boy, I can say some stuff, man. So it's like, yeah, that's what I be feeling it, man. Like it'll start, but it'll like leave. Man, I feel it right now in my jaw, because like, man, it's like it's supposed to be like in a professional setting. You're like, man, do not be ratchet today. Be professional. And it's like, man, yeah, that's what I've been going through.
Oh, I can relate to that. For me, as I go to release my anxiety, it always comes out through writing. And so even my two children have started to recognize when I'm angry writing. They're like, wow, Mom, it's not the paper's fault. Just tell me what I can do, what not do. Sorry, little cathartic moment there. So if that is where you feel it reside, that's the somatic response. Like my angry writing, what is the way that you process it? What is the way that you have found? Dr. Yule, you mentioned the practice of tea drinking. Tell us a bit more about that.
It helps me to slow down. It helps me to slow down the process of selecting a tea. Chantel, I love the name of your business, Thyme. So I love actually, being a Caribbean man, thyme is a very important culinary herb in the Caribbean. So, just selecting a thyme that I've dried and, steeping it, holding that, hot cup, waiting for it to cool. It's a moment of reflection. It forces me to slow down and be present. So I think that's the therapeutic value in it. Yeah. I mean, also there's also the pharmacology aspect of, you know, the herb being, you know, a calming nervine agent, but just the process, you know, of engaging is therapeutic in of itself.
I wonder if that's a Caribbean tradition, because I definitely grew up and continue every night has to conclude with a cup of tea. And yeah, out there in live land, drop us a note if you can relate to the cup of tea at night or the coffee in the morning, that tradition. Yeah, that's interesting. How about for you, Sadie? What's the practice?
So this is one that it used to be, so pre-kids, right? It used to be hours of yoga, uninterrupted writing, like midnight walks. Those were the things pre-kids. And I'm still learning like how to manage life with kids. And I have a 7.5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. And one of the things that we do is we have a list of sort of coping strategies. And I kind of made note of what mine were. And they were very much so of like the tips of coping that you guys shared, of like exercising, connecting with people, having some sort of ritual, whether it's tea or coffee or a meditation or a bath or whatever, or your sourdough bread or whatever it is, right? To have that sort of ritual to emote and to feel those feelings. And to go in deep to those, making sure you come out, and then a refocus of that systems and reminders of mindset. So all those things, like we have sort of a list of like what works with our kids, like and sort of supporting them in their behavior. And I've really gone back to like treating myself like the 2-year-old that's trying to manage and navigate all these new things, because this is a new thing, like the pandemic, right? Like that sort of global level of consciousness that like we are all experiencing, like this era. So it's new. So I'm kind of treating myself with like, I have these lists of strategies. So whether it's coffee and tea or like a mint, right? Or to connecting with friends or whatever it is. And sometimes like the one that I choose, like the writing won't work for me. So I go back and restart. And so that I have this constant like sort of rolling list of like these 7 to 8 things that have traditionally worked for me that I go back, restart. Sometimes and none of them work. And by the time I get to the bottom, I might be ready to resurface to the top by talking to someone. So moving through those. So for me personally, it's knowing those things that work, but like lately what works is having the schedule of meditation practices. Once we feel those like anxieties rising, like in myself and with our kids, like we go to like Insight Timer or do a Mind Yeti and bring back for like 2 to 3 minutes of breathing and reconnecting and refocusing. So that and yoga and food, like nourishing food that we create as a family. And then there's like the times where like take a mint, take a bath, take a cry. So variable, right?
Yes, and just the order can change, right?
Right. I don't know. I've never been here before, right? There's some things that feel familiar, but like, yeah, we want to keep growing, right? And I want to grow into sort of to cultivate richness in relationships, to pull through and to see the people I love and the people that I live around and live with on this globe pull through. So yeah, rinse and repeat.
Yes. Chantel, how about for you? What's the process of, what's the first thing you go to in those moments?
I say a quick prayer, like just something simple, like, you know, like shoot, it's not nothing deep. Just be like, okay, Lord help me, or like, you know, all right, just a small thought, you know. And what else do I do? I mean, I drink tea too. And I hope this is okay, but I have a tea, my tea line. So so I'm gonna send you guys all a bag, you know what I'm saying, since you guys like drinking tea too. And it has thyme in it, peachy thyme, that's why I call it thyme, you know what I'm saying? So I'll hook you guys up with that.
Tell us the name of the tea.
It's called tea time. So it's like The one flavor is like apple mint. It comes loose now because I haven't figured out how to get it bottled yet. But since I'm in the beginning stages, that's what I like to do is like do things slow. You know what I'm saying? So, like he said, being present and steeping and just relaxing and meditating is like, it's like even from when you brew a cup of tea, it's like from the first to the time you consume it, it's a step, it's a process. And just having it like, just the warmth of it, just like, I can't even explain it, what it does for you, you know? And then even if you don't have tea, it's kind of like the same thing. When I think of happy thought or I think of prayer, it's like something tough is happening. I can't have control of it. So I'm going to steep my thoughts and then just let something just flow, you know?
Yes.
If that makes any sense. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, for every viewer out there who is watching in Facebook land or in the panel, look under your chair. There's a bag of tea. Just kidding. There's no bag of tea time under your chair. I'm sorry, I'm not Oprah yet. But please tell us, where's the website where we can find tea time?
So it's timewellspentinc.com. Time like the herb. Or you can order my, or you can order my Facebook page, Time Well Spent Catering. But yeah, if you want to pick like a participant or somebody, I'll be more than happy to give them something too. And I'm gonna hook you all the panel up too. So
thank you.
Can you throw a link, or can someone, a moderator, throw the link into our chat so that people can quickly write on?
Yes. All righty. So thank you so much for that. Look at how the universe delivers. Amanda, besides the cup of tea that we know you're going to be having tomorrow, what is your strategy when times are particularly stressful?
Yeah, I mean, definitely +1 to the cup of tea. You know, absolutely, I'll join that club, and that's fantastic. That's so sweet of you. I think for me, in the moment, it's breathing and slowing everything down. It's sort of, I feel like it feels like everything's rushed. It's stopping. It's kind of letting things go, not being in such a rush. But I think of in general, I think of it like I use a rain barrel analogy. So I've got a rain barrel that's collecting rainwater, and sometimes there's stuff that builds up inside, so it has less capacity for rain when it comes down, and it'll overflow. And in my case, literally a lot of times. And so what I do to try to keep that level of, you know, like silt and dirt at the bottom of it clear is things like, yeah, having a cup of tea, sitting down, having a ritual, that sort of thing. But also for me, I'm a huge fan. Like I read a lot. I'm a sci-fi fan. I like shows, and one of the things that I wake up in the middle of the night and then start thinking too many things and can't go back to sleep. So having a book that's familiar to me, like an old friend that I reread, or listen to on audio, and I've read before, so I know what's going to happen. So I'm not sort of hanging on every word, but it feels like a friend is talking to me, or I'm going back into a world that I hadn't done before, and it's very kind of comforting. So I go the distraction both and helping me kind of slow down from that intense experience, and then also find something familiar, and I'm not waking my friends up at 3 a.m, which is probably helpful for our friendship. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. I've never heard that before. I think I will try that. I normally have 10 or so books around. So I love that idea of one that is just an old friend. Ooh. As we start to wrap up today, I think one of the things that I would love to hear about you and your experience, and I will say that I'm always surprised by the stigma that we have in our society about mental health, about anxiety. And so I'm both so thankful that you would come on today to speak so honestly and openly about your experience with it and how you also create strategies to manage it. But what is it that you would like to leave as a final thought for someone who is out there listening today and who really sees themselves in your story? What would you like them to know? Anybody can start.
Well, I'll start. I'll say I really love what you shared about having your Rolodex or your group of coping mechanisms and constantly reevaluating them to see what works and what doesn't. You know, because what worked on Monday may not work on Thursday. It's taking an Epsom salt bath, you know, which inevitably is a magnesium salt, which is, it calms you down, it relaxes your muscles. I mean, I'm 6'7", I wish I could fit in my tub, you know. So, it's important to have that bag of coping mechanisms and to kind of reevaluate what it is, and don't allow anyone to say that your coping mechanism isn't the best. So long as it works for you. I've had patients who needed, a Xanax or a Prozac or a Paxil because it was just too much. It needed something to take the edge, and that's okay. Sometimes a cup of tea may not be appropriate. So whatever works for you. And like I said, it's very personal. You know, I don't know for you guys, but when we found out that the banks had reached their limit for processing SBA loans, you know, many of us entrepreneurs were like, what the hell is going on?
Yes.
But then Shake Shack get $10 million. But, you know, so whatever works. And I think it's important to constantly have to reevaluate the coping mechanisms that you've learned and see what works for you. And it's a personal thing, and it's your journey, and what works for you is valid. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. It is personal, and what works for you is valid. Somebody needed to hear that today. Thank you. Whom else?
Yes, to all of those things. And also, Dr. Ewell, even though you're 6'7", you could invest in some magnesium lotion to put on the bottom of your feet, and it's the same effect as an Epsom salt bath. So
I thought you were going to say he could just like have his feet.
That too. Except for you won't see me doing that move right now.
Well, you can tell this is a virtual show because I'm not willing to. But
what I was going to say, though, is to push yourself to be open, to be seen, and to be vulnerable. Because like, it may not be something that you're comfortable with, but we're all in a pretty uncomfortable space as it is, just being human. And you might be really surprised as to what sort of support and resources and opportunities that exist with that. I know that when I have like a spread of people that have like surfaced as intentional family, right? Some of my neighbors, friends that I've had for years, that are people that I've encountered just recently even, that want to be able to show up for me and for my family. Like, we're creative entrepreneurs with 2 kids that rely on the event industry that's going to be out until July and beyond, right? At a minimum. And we have, you know, when I've been open to saying that we're living this existence, like, we have just so much support from places that I wouldn't have anticipated. And it's because I've been open and I've been okay with being vulnerable. And it's a gift to be able to show up in that way and just try something new, right? And being open. Like, our family is usually fairly private and put on a really strong face. Like, and that's another mantra, is that I'm strong, right? And to go into the eye of the storm. But there's some times where we need that support, and it can feel uncomfortable, but it is also incredibly validating to be supported, to be loved by places that you wouldn't have expected it otherwise.
yes. Oh, I can so relate to that in terms of being a single mother, and, you know, the shower of support of my community internationally that said, we're here to support you in whatever way, and being surprised at some of the ways that offers of support were coming in. And I think part of the practice sometimes as entrepreneurs, as living in a society where strength is really valued is that it is also a growth practice to receive. It
Mhm.
opens oneself to be nurtured and cared for almost like the child.
Mhm.
And so I often find that with my clients, it is that the anxiety is then exacerbated by the idea that they have to manage it alone.
Mm.
How about for you, Amanda or Chantel? What would you like to leave us with?
I think for me, I think as a business leader and a manager of people, it's really important to me. I agree like with so many of these things, and it's really important to me to be vocal about them and to be vulnerable in front of people and people I lead or that I work with. As a way to make it safe for them also to feel that way, and to do so to sort of put my money where my mouth is in terms of saying, yeah, whatever your coping mechanism, whatever you believe, if you need help, I'm here, we're here to support you. But I'm also doing the same thing, and I'm also showing that I have fear, that I have times when I'm bursting in tears, and it's okay because I'm still gonna get up and roll up my sleeves and get the next thing done and be amazing and great at what I do, and still cry while I'm doing it, and that's okay.
And that's okay. Thank you. Chantel, last thoughts?
I guess I'll just leave you with like a little quote. In order to get to a rainbow, you have to go through some rain. So just remember that, it may look like a storm now, but this is your time to shine. Like, push through it. Like, you have to speak affirmations to yourself. Whether you feel like your body you can't do it, or you feel like your mind isn't on focus on any goals or anything, you just got to push through it and just remember that you're a warrior, you're strong, you're just stay encouraged and just speak life into yourself. No matter what your body or your mind is doing, you just got to speak positive things.
Yes, or invite others to drip positive words into you as well. Thank you, Sadie, Chantel, Dr. Yule, Amanda, for joining us today. And thank you to everybody out there who joined us live here in the webinar or on Facebook, or we'll see you later on YouTube. We are so thankful to the GSBA for making this space and creating a space for business leaders and for a community to come together, both here in Washington and around the country and growing internationally. Remember that you always have a friend here with us at the GSBA, and we will drip words of love and support into you whenever you have need of it. We'll see you next week at the same time in the same place, and have a good day.